Hello dear listeners, welcome back to Sleepy History. Tonight, you're not a soldier or a diplomat. You're not a merchant prince or an adventurer with a map and a destiny. You're just another drifter with too much curiosity, not enough common sense, and a very unfortunate taste for escape. You've come to Colonial Shanghai, a city carved up like a roast duck by foreign powers and greed, where the air is thick with steamships' whispers and the slow, sweet smoke of your undoing. You don't know it yet, but your lungs are going to fill with more opium than oxygen, and you'll spend the rest of your short life chasing a feeling that never quite comes back. Before we dive into the fog, leave a comment letting us know where you're listening from, just the city and the time. We're always curious to hear from our audience drifting through the haze. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Now, lie back, breathe in, and don't ask what's in the pipe. You don't really want to know. You arrive in Shanghai with more optimism than sense, and just enough coin in your pocket to get yourself into trouble. The year is something like 1875, give or take a revolution. History is a bit blurry here. The calendars don't match, the clocks don't agree, and the city runs on its own kind of time, measured not in minutes but in money, favours, and the number of times you've been lied to today. You step off the boat with stiff legs and high hopes, squinting into a haze that might be mist or smoke, or opium fumes leaking from the walls. You tell yourself, this is the start of something, a new chapter, a bold venture. But Shanghai doesn't care what you told yourself. Shanghai already has plans for you. The docks are chaos. Coolies shout over one another while hauling crates full of silk tea and things better left unlabelled. Foreign men in top hats bark orders in English, French, or angry approximations of Mandarin. Local children dart between carriages, selling sweets or watching tourists with the kind of old eyes that suggest they've seen more brutality than you'll manage in a lifetime. The streets smell like coal smoke, sweat, perfume, and river rot, a bouquet of desperation with just a hint of profit. Somewhere nearby, a cannon from a British gunboat reminds the city who's in charge. You flinch. No one else does. You're new. It shows. You find a place to stay in the international settlement, a part of the city technically under British jurisdiction, though the only real law here is leverage. The buildings are squat, brick-faced things with iron railings and peeling paint, trying very hard to look like something from London, but failing spectacularly in the humidity. The landlords have names like Smay and Holbrook, and pretend not to notice the cockroaches skittering across their ledges. You pay too much for a room that smells like damp wallpaper and dying dreams, and try to convince yourself it's temporary, that you'll move up, that you're just passing through. Outside your boarding house, the streets are alive in the way a festering wound is alive. Rickshaws bump past sedan chairs, and opium carts rattle by like mobile funerals. You hear a woman screaming in Shanghainese from a second-story window, something about debt or betrayal or maybe just dinner. Below her, a European banker steps over a beggar like he's avoiding a puddle. You pass a shop selling powdered rhino horn and porcelain teacups next to a British pub called the Imperial Lion that smells like old meat and bad decisions. This isn't the East you read about in books. This isn't silk robes and sage wisdom. This is empire with its boots off, scratching itself. You're not quite sure what brought you here. Betrayal, maybe, or boredom, or the seductive idea that you could escape whatever version of yourself you left behind in Liverpool or Boston or Sydney. You told people you were going to make your fortune. You told yourself you were different. But Shanghai is a city built to devour optimism. It doesn't matter why you came. What matters is that you've already started to disappear. The city is divided, though no one agrees exactly how. There are boundaries here, official ones marked on maps and unofficial ones marked by poverty, skin colour, and how badly you want to keep your teeth. The British have their enclave, complete with soldiers, courts, and afternoon tea. The French have theirs, where everyone drinks wine and pretends they're not also here for the money. The Americans loiter somewhere in between, trying to sell guns and Bibles. The Chinese live everywhere else, which is to say in the parts of Shanghai that actually feel like Shanghai, rather than a parody of a European postcard. These areas are loud, crowded, frantic. They smell like garlic, incense, and unwashed feet. You prefer them. Not that it makes a difference. At night, the gas lamps flicker like they're afraid of the dark. You walk streets where the buildings lean in toward one another like conspirators, where shadows cling to the brick like mould, and where the soft, low hum of opium dens leaks through shuttered windows. You pass a man vomiting into a gutter, a child curled up under a stairwell, and a woman with no shoes offering something you don't want to understand. The city pulses around you, alive and rotting like a corpse that hasn't realized it's dead yet. And all the while, there's the smoke. Thick, tarry, bittersweet. It curls from alleyways and dens, from open doorways and private parlours. You smell it before you ever see the pipe. It slips into your nose, coats your throat, turns the edges of your thoughts soft. You think of it as background at first, just another part of the city's strange perfume, but the smell will stay with you, cling to your clothes, sink into your skin. You don't know it yet, but it's already calling you. You're not special, you're not destined, you're not the first naive foreigner to step into Shanghai thinking it would hand you something valuable in return for your ambition. This city doesn't hand things out. It sells them to you in pieces, and by the time you realize the cost, it's already taken the parts of you that mattered. You came here looking for a new life. What you'll get is a very slow death, wrapped in velvet smoke and colonial lies. Welcome to Shanghai, try not to breathe too deeply. It isn't a city in the traditional sense. It's a machine, a colonial organism kept alive by greed, contradiction, and a heavy dose of denial. It doesn't grow, it metastasizes. Foreign powers carved it into quarters like a stolen pie, each claiming their slice in the name of progress, civilization, or commerce, whichever lie sounded best that week. You don't notice it right away, but the boundaries are everywhere. British gas lamps give way to French sycamores, which give way again to Chinese rooftops pressed together like folding fans. Each district runs on its own rules, currency, and logic, none of which you fully understand. You move between them like a ghost, too foreign for one, too foreign for the other, and too naive to realize it doesn't matter. No one's asking where you belong. The British settlement is the most obvious example of imported arrogance. Brick buildings with columns, names like Empire House and Victoria Exchange, and a faint but persistent scent of imported soap. It's orderly in the way only colonized places pretend to be. Law-abiding for those who write the laws, and lawless for those who must obey them. The French concession is more stylish and chaotic, where the wine flows faster than paperwork, and everyone is either having an affair or pretending they're not. The Americans loiter somewhere in between, trying to sell guns and Bibles. The Chinese live everywhere else, which is to say in the parts of Shanghai that actually feel like Shanghai rather than a parody of a European postcard. These areas are loud, crowded, frantic. They smell like garlic, incense, and unwashed feet. You prefer them, not that it makes a difference. What ties these districts together isn't governance or language or anything resembling shared humanity. It's trade, and by trade, you increasingly mean opium. Not officially, of course. The official word is commerce, but commerce here has a very specific smell. Thick, sticky, faintly sweet, and a very specific form. Tarp-packed bricks wrapped in oil paper, stamped with characters, and shipped in crates marked tea, or spices, or not at all. If you want to know what really runs Shanghai, you follow the crates. They pass through customs without being opened. They move from go-down to counting house to pipe faster than any law can keep up. The money flows upward. Indian-grown poppies sold by British firms, taxed by Chinese officials, smoked by the poor, and funded by the slow death of everyone involved. You can see the effects if you know where to look, not just in the bodies curled beneath awnings, but in the houses built on those bodies. Wealth here doesn't build upward, it insulates outward. Thicker walls, wider verandas, imported pianos. Men speak of the trade like it's a tide they merely float on, not something they profit from. They insist that the opium problem is a moral failing, but only of those too weak to moderate. You learn quickly that nothing says respectability, like profiting from someone else's collapse, while pretending you're shocked by it. Within this system, you're mostly irrelevant. You don't have enough capital to exploit anyone and not enough local knowledge to protect yourself. You're a bystander at best, a target at worst. Everyone here is watching everyone else, not out of curiosity but calculation. Where you eat, who you associate with, how much silver you carry, it all signals something. And once the wrong people know you're expendable, they treat you accordingly. Invitations stop coming, prices go up. The den doors stay open a little longer when you pass by, just in case today's the day. You begin to notice things you didn't before. The Chinese sections of the city are overcrowded, not just because of population, but policy. Restrictions on land ownership, limited sanitation, policing that looks more like extortion. Meanwhile, the foreign districts hold garden parties and pass resolutions about civic hygiene. It's not even subtle. The whole city is built like a hierarchy etched into brick and bone. The whiter your skin, the higher you're allowed to climb. But you're not at the top. You're just a lower-tier outsider. Decorative perhaps, disposable certainly. And still, for all its division, Shanghai feels unified in one respect. It moves at a speed that doesn't wait for the dying. The sick are stepped over, the broke are evicted, the dead are cleared before lunch. A man can be smoking one moment and dragged out by his heels the next, and no one even blinks. This is a city designed to absorb pain without flinching, because behind every collapsed figure is a replacement, another arrival, another optimist, another future addict who doesn't yet know how this place works. You hear the word before you see the pipe. Yan. Opium. It slips between conversations like a rumour too old to question. You hear it from traders, dock workers, missionaries pretending not to notice what their parishioners are smoking behind the church. It's in the background of every transaction, whether you're buying silk or just a seat on the tram. Even people who don't touch the stuff talk about it, mostly with contempt, sometimes with longing, always with a weary tone of someone who knows it isn't going anywhere. The drug isn't hidden, it's not whispered like a sin. It's more like weather, ever present, sometimes heavier than others, but always in the air. Some places serve it with tea, some tuck it into paper packets as casually as sugar. Some wrap it in respectability, with nice furniture and imported wallpaper, and men who wear waistcoats while slowly erasing themselves. There are dens that cater to the poor, dark and damp, where the floor sticks to your shoes. And then there are the elegant ones, where French curtains filter the afternoon sun, and the ashtrays are sterling silver. No matter your class, there's always a pipe within reach. Opium doesn't discriminate, it just waits. You start to understand that this isn't just a vice or a trend. This is infrastructure. This is how the city functions. It's taxed, tracked, and shipped with more care than most people. The British East India Company perfected the system years before you arrived. Grow it in India, ship it to China, sell it at a premium, use the profits to buy Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain to sell back home. Everyone wins, except the Chinese, and now, except you. You're stepping into a supply chain that begins in Bengal, passes through Canton, and ends in your bloodstream. The drug built fortunes, funded colonial governments, and paid for the very roads you walk on. You'll never be rich from it, but you'll help someone else stay that way. People still talk about the wars, though usually with the kind of historical detachment that makes you forget how recently it all happened. The first Opium War began in 1839, when the Qing government finally tried to crack down on the trade. They seized and destroyed massive shipments of British opium. Britain responded with warships, superior firepower, and the calm certainty of a nation that knew it could shoot its way into a better profit margin. China lost badly, and when it ended, they didn't just have to pay reparations. They had to legalize the very thing they tried to ban. Shanghai became a treaty port, pried open like a clam, and left raw. The Second Opium War followed a few decades later, just in case anyone thought the first one was a misunderstanding. This time, it was even uglier. Looted palaces, burned archives, treaties signed under duress. By the end of it, foreign powers had secured even more control. They could trade freely, travel inland, preach, sell, and of course, push opium with near total impunity. No one likes to say it outright, but the truth is obvious. Britain didn't just go to war over drugs. It went to war for the right to keep its customers addicted. Now, the business is institutionalized. You see it in the ledgers of shipping firms, the columns of import taxes, the smug grins of colonial officials who insist they're just upholding treaties. Even the missionaries get their cut, whether they admit it or not. Some rail against the drug in sermons and then rent church-owned property to opium dealers. Others hold prayer meetings outside dens while quietly accepting donations from men with stained fingertips. The hypocrisy isn't subtle, but neither is the profit. You meet people who still try to resist it, reformers who write angry pamphlets and circulate them at great personal risk, local officials who try to enforce bans with dwindling authority, mothers who lock their sons in basements to sweat through withdrawal alone. But the tide is too strong. The trade isn't just a river. It's an ocean, and you're standing ankle deep, pretending you won't be pulled under. You wonder what makes it so irresistible. You've never touched the stuff, not yet, but you've seen the look in the eyes of those who have. Not pleasure exactly, not even peace, just a kind of absence, like someone standing at the edge of sleep. The smokers look as though they've given up asking questions, as though for a few hours the unbearable weight of being alive in this city becomes tolerable. Maybe that's the point. It doesn't make things better, it just makes them irrelevant. And there's something else, a strange reverence in the way people talk about it, not like a drug, but like a ritual. The pipe, the lamp, the slow inhalation, it's all practiced, repeated, perfected. You've seen men with the shakes fumble for it like it's the last remaining piece of themselves. You've seen women exhale like they're releasing entire decades. You're beginning to suspect that addiction isn't a side effect. It's the goal. You tell yourself you're just going to look. That's the first lie. You say it to no one in particular as you walk past the red lantern swaying above a narrow door and let your hand pause just a second too long on the frame. Maybe you're curious. Maybe you're bored. Maybe you've simply run out of other things to pretend you care about. Either way, your feet make the decision for you. You duck inside. The air thickens around you immediately, warmer, denser, laced with something sweet and terrible. You're not here to smoke, you remind yourself. You're just observing, a harmless little tour of Shanghai's most whispered vice. You repeat the lie until it tastes familiar. The den is smaller than you imagined and darker. Curtains hang in uneven folds, dividing the room into narrow compartments. The lamps are low and yellow, casting halos that barely reach the floor. Everything seems muffled, sound, light, even movement. It smells like incense, sweat, mildew, and something richer underneath, something almost floral. Opium. You recognize it now. You've smelled it before, on the street drifting out of doorways, clinging to the sleeves of men who passed you with dead eyes. But here it's concentrated, saturated. It's in the fabric, in the floorboards, in the breath of the man who gestures for you to sit. You hesitate, still performing the fiction of self-control, but your legs move again without permission. The couch beneath you is stained but soft. There's a pipe already waiting, its bowl still warm, resting beside a small lamp and a shallow tray of the tar-like substance. The attendant doesn't ask if you want to smoke. He just begins preparing the dose with practiced ease, rolling the opium into a black pearl between his fingers, then toasting it gently over the flame until it glistens. You watch his hands more than the drug. They're steady, calm. You envy them. The pipe comes to your lips like it's always belonged there. That's the second lie, that this is your first time. The heat of the smoke surprises you, but not unpleasantly. It moves down your throat like velvet soaked in alcohol. There's a bitterness, sharp and earthy, but it fades quickly, replaced by something sweet and numbing. Your eyes water, your fingers twitch. And then, nothing, or rather, everything all at once smoothed over like polished glass. The noise in your head, the hunger, the restlessness, the ache of simply existing fades so quickly that you almost panic. You realize you've been carrying pain you didn't know how to name, and now it's gone. Your body relaxes too much and too fast. You slump against the cushion, feel the room tilt slightly, like a ship easing into calm water. Your breath slows. You hear it now, the rhythm of the den. Not voices, not really, but the soft inhale, exhale of dozens of lungs taking in and giving up. The sound of people floating. Someone laughs softly from behind a curtain. Someone else coughs, a wet sound that doesn't stop. You try to care, but it feels distant, like news from another life. You close your eyes. You're still. It is quiet. For the first time in Shanghai, you are not afraid. Time doesn't pass so much as melt. You can't say whether you're there for minutes or hours. The lamp beside you flickers. You forget your name, then remember it again and laugh quietly at how unimportant it feels. Your limbs are heavy and light at the same time. Your thoughts slow, unravel, reform into shapes you don't recognize. At one point you try to stand. You don't succeed. You decide it isn't worth the effort. Eventually the smoke thins, the high ebbs. You open your eyes and the room is no longer golden but grey. The sweetness has turned sour in your mouth. You notice the dirt in the corner of the floor, the flies circling your ankle, the ache returning to your spine. You sit up too fast and your vision flickers. Your stomach churns with hunger and something like shame. The attendant offers you water from a chipped bowl. You drink it without thinking. You leave the den just before dusk. The street outside is louder than you remember, too sharp, too real. The light makes you squint. You feel like a peeled fruit, raw and exposed. You tell yourself you're done. It was a one-time thing, a curiosity satisfied, a box checked off the list of colonial experiences you'll now try to forget. But already you feel the absence, a cold patch in your chest where the warmth was. You don't miss the high exactly. You miss the silence. The next day is worse. Your limbs ache and not from exertion. Your mood shifts with the wind. Coffee doesn't help. Walking doesn't help. You try to read, to write, to distract yourself with anything that doesn't involve velvet smoke. But your thoughts return to it again and again, to the moment the pipe touched your lips, to the way your fear dissolved like sugar in tea. I don't want to go back. That's the third lie. You tell it to yourself as you count the coins in your pocket, just to see if there's enough. You start thinking in maybe. Maybe once more, maybe a smaller dose. Maybe it wasn't the opium. Maybe it was just being tired. Maybe you deserve a little peace. You frame it as a kindness. You dress it up in language that still lets you feel in control. But the truth is simpler, uglier, and much older than you. The hook is in. Not deep yet. Not through the bone, but far enough to pull. You'll return. Of course you will. Not because you want to, but because now you don't quite remember how to feel safe without it. And soon you won't remember how to feel anything at all. By the third visit, you've stopped pretending it's research. By the seventh, the smoke feels more real than daylight. You didn't mean to become a regular. It just happened. You stopped keeping track of how many times you returned because tracking implies choice, and choice is a story you've stopped telling yourself. The den isn't a destination anymore. It's a routine. A second home. The first one being that cramped boarding room with the wallpaper that peels in long strips and the mattress that smells like forgotten hopes. But the den is different. The den is quiet, predictable, software. It holds you without asking questions, no expectations, no consequences. Just a pipe, a place to lie down, and the gentle permission to stop feeling anything at all. You know the layout now, and more importantly, you know how to move through it. How to nod at the attendants without speaking. How to step over the feet of someone half-conscious and twitching. How to keep your shoes close to your cot so no one else claims them before morning. The bunks are low and narrow, separated by ragged curtains that don't block sound, but do offer the illusion of privacy. The shadows are thick, and they move strangely. Sometimes you think you see someone sitting up beside you, only to blink and realize it's a pile of blankets or no one at all. Sometimes it's the opposite. There's a rhythm to the place, like a tide that ebbs and flows with the lungs of the room. Pipes hiss gently in the dark. Someone always coughs, a low, ragged sound that never quite stops. Once in a while, someone murmurs a name, theirs maybe, or someone they lost, and then falls silent again. Most people don't speak. Some never move. You've shared a bunk wall with the same man for weeks and aren't sure if he's still alive. You've stopped checking. If he is, he'll stir when the pipe reaches him. If not, someone will eventually carry him out. You no longer notice the passage of time. The den doesn't deal in hours or days. It deals in sessions, in burns of the pipe, in the slow dissolve of waking into sleep and sleep into waking. Morning means nothing. Meals are irregular and forgettable. Outside, noises filter in from the street. Bells, voices, horses, but they might as well be coming from another continent. At some point, someone mentions the date and you laugh. Not because it's funny, but because the word feels so ridiculous now. Dates are for people with futures. The people who run the den know you now, though they don't say so. Your pipe is always ready, a little faster. Your usual bunk left unclaimed unless someone desperate takes it first. Even then, they'll usually move when you arrive without a word. There's a hierarchy here, unspoken but rigid. It isn't about wealth or race or age. It's about how far you've fallen. The more broken you are, the less anyone dares to cross you. Some of the most shattered people in the den are treated with quiet reverence, as if the others are afraid they'll become mirrors. You start to forget things. First the small details. What day it is, where you put your boots, how long since you last saw the sun. Then it gets worse. You forget the name of your landlord. You forget where your coins came from. You forget what you looked like before you started spending nights here. Eventually, you stop caring. One morning, or maybe evening, you can't tell. You catch your reflection in a darkened window. You stare at it for a long time, waiting to recognize something. You don't. The outside world becomes a rumor. You hear that there was a fire in the French concession, or a riot in the Chinese city, or that another opium ship just came in loaded to the hull. You hear that someone important died, that the price of tea has changed, that there's been a crackdown somewhere by someone. But it all sounds like theatre, distant noise. You can't even pretend to care. Your world has narrowed to the size of a cot, a pipe, and the brief space between dreams and oblivion. Some of the dreams are vivid. Not pleasant, necessarily, but intense. You dream of people you've never met, places you've never been. You speak languages you don't know. Sometimes you're flying, sometimes falling, sometimes simply floating through a city that looks like Shanghai but isn't. When you wake, your heart races, and for a few seconds you think you've come back to life. Then you smell the smoke again and remember where you are. The dreams were just part of the high, and the high, like everything else, has started to dull. It takes more now. More opium to reach the same silence. More time to push the noise away. You chase the feeling, but never quite catch it. What once came easily now demands effort, and when it arrives, it's thinner, ghostly, like an echo of what you used to feel. You try not to think about that. You just ask for another pearl, another burn, another hour of stillness. The den doesn't question you, it just accommodates. Occasionally someone dies, quietly, efficiently, without ceremony. You don't witness it often. Bodies are removed quickly through a back door or covered under a blanket until night. No one reacts. No one mourns. Death in the den is just another part of the rhythm. A silence where there used to be a cough. A space in a bunk that fills again within the hour. You wonder sometimes if someone will notice when it's your turn, whether anyone will pause, whether anyone will care. You think about leaving. You even try once. You make it as far as the street, blinking against the sunlight, your hands trembling, your stomach turning. The noise is unbearable. The faces are too sharp. The movement too fast. You stand on the curb for 10 full minutes before turning back. The den welcomes you without judgment. The pipe is still warm. No one asks what happened. That's the worst part. They knew you'd come back. This is your life now. A half dream inside a half room, surrounded by people slowly vanishing one inhale at a time. You don't know how long it's been. You don't ask. You don't need to. Because whatever you had before this, a job, a future, a name, is gone. And all that's left is the smoke, the silence, and the slow, painless collapse into something less than human. You think your addiction is personal? It isn't. It's industrial, designed, optimized. You are never the customer, just the end point of an empire's distribution chain. The pipe you hold isn't a habit. It's a tool, a method for transferring silver from China to Britain, painlessly and efficiently, at least for Britain. The poppies didn't grow in Shanghai. They were cultivated by the British in India. Entire regions in Bengal, Bihar and Malwa transformed into production zones, not for food, but for intoxication. Rice fields were replaced with rows of poppies. Farmers were coerced. Loans were issued, debt mounted, and suddenly a whole population was growing addiction for a different empire. The British even had branding: Patna Opium, labelled, graded, prized. The product moved with bureaucratic elegance. It was auctioned in Kolkata, shipped across the Bay of Bengal, and landed smoothly in Chinese ports like a seasonal good. No smuggling, no secrecy, just profit. The British East India Company handled the logistics. British officials ensured protection. British banks handled the money. The system was so large, so clean on paper, that even when it killed, it looked like a business success. And when China resisted, when the emperor's officials started burning the crates and blocking the ports, the British answered not with negotiation, but with gunboats. That's what the Opium Wars were, not noble conflicts over trade rights or diplomatic slights. They were wars to keep selling drugs, wars to keep people like you hooked. And when China lost, Britain didn't just claim victory, it claimed territory. That's why Shanghai is the way it is now, a divided city with foreign flags, foreign laws, foreign money. The Treaty of Nanking made sure of that. Whole districts were carved out as concessions, immune to Chinese authority. The opium trade moved in like it had always belonged, and no one stopped it because too many people were getting rich. You were never going to escape this because this isn't about weakness, it's about structure. The dens aren't run by accidents, they're maintained by logistics. The smoke that fills your lungs travelled thousands of miles under armed escort and signed documents. You didn't fall. You were placed. The empire doesn't care what opium does to your teeth or your liver or your dreams. It cares what it does to the silver market. It cares how many chests it can move in a quarter. It tracks bulk, not blood. Each user is a digit, and each death is just proof that the demand remains high. It doesn't need loyalty. It doesn't need faith. It just needs you to keep needing. And if you die, so be it. You weren't the only one smoking. You weren't even the only one dying. There's always someone else, another mouth to feed the hunger, another body to soak in the smoke. The supply chain doesn't mourn you, it replaces you. Even now, lying half-conscious in a den that smells like mould and regret, the empire is still moving. A clerk is logging a shipment, a broker is calculating tariffs, a ship is docking with crates of your undoing, neatly stacked and stamped. No one sees your face, no one says your name, but your purchase still echoes, not as a cry for help, but as a revenue. You might tell yourself this is personal, that you made your own decisions, that you had a choice, and maybe you did, for a little while. But the empire was always bigger than your discipline. It had better planning, better maps, better math. It waited, and when you slipped, once, just once, it caught you. You can't boycott it. You can't protest it. You can't escape it by dying because the machine that built this, the company ledgers, the shipping routes, the polite euphemisms about trade imbalances, has already moved on to someone else. Your body is irrelevant. Your suffering is irrelevant. The system survives precisely because it doesn't notice. So when you light the next pipe, know this. The fire is British. The poppy is Indian. The ruin is yours. And none of it was accidental. You don't notice much of the outside world at first, not because it isn't crumbling, but because you're too busy crumbling alongside it. The den cocoons you in silence and smoke, and it becomes easy to pretend nothing exists beyond the curtains. But the city hasn't stopped rotting just because you've chosen to lie down. Shanghai is festering. The streets echo with the sounds of protest, hunger, and gunmetal diplomacy. And while you ignore it for as long as you can, eventually reality claws its way back in. Usually around the time your last coin clinks at the bottom of your pocket when you're forced out onto the street, usually in search of silver or something to trade for another pipe. The stench hits first, not just sewage or sweat or the chemical bitterness of a river that forgot how to flow. Hello guys, welcome back. In Victorian London, you didn't just pay to sleep, you paid to sit up straight all night on a wooden bench while a man with a stick smacked you if your chin touched your chest. Welcome to the penny sit-up, where the desperate handed over their last coin for the privilege of not freezing to death on the street. Before we dive into this nightmare, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future stories. Also, tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I'm always reading them and thinking, wait, people in New Zealand listen to history stories to sleep? So get comfortable, pull that blanket up, and adjust your pillow. You're going to need that comfort because we're heading to London, 1887, and there's nothing comfortable waiting for us there. A London night, 1887. Your eyes snap open to the smell of cold smoke and unwashed bodies. For a moment, your brain struggles to make sense of the dense, fetid fog filling your lungs. You're on a hard wooden bench in a cavernous hall, packed shoulder to shoulder with other bodies, the Salvation Army's penny sit-up shelter on Blackfriars Road. Every muscle in your back screams from the strain of sitting upright all night. The bench has no backrest, just a flat, splintered plank worn smooth by the thousands of desperate bodies who came before yours. Your neck is stiff, your shoulders knotted. There is no comfort here. "Oi, no sleeping!" The sharp crack of a stick against the bench beside you jolts your body upright. The monitor, a gaunt man with a face like a disappointed vulture, glares as he passes. His job is simple. Make sure no one who paid a penny gets the luxury of actual sleep. That costs extra. "I paid my penny fare," mutters the man next to you, a skeletal figure with hands like gnarled roots. Ought to let a man close his eyes for a bleedin' minute. He's right, of course, but the rules of the penny sit-up are brutally simple. 1 penny buys you a spot on this bench until morning. No lying down, no sleeping, just sitting upright through the endless night hours, fighting exhaustion while surrounded by the sounds and smells of 200 other souls doing the same. The hall stretches before you, dimly lit by a few oil lamps that cast more shadow than light. In the murky darkness, you can make out row after row of benches, each packed with huddled figures. Men mostly, but some women and a few children are here too, even though they're meant to go to separate shelters. Everyone stares vacantly ahead or whispers to neighbours, their eyes hollow. First time? The man on your other side leans in. His breath smells of gin and rotting teeth, but his eyes are surprisingly kind. You can tell he wasn't born to this life. He holds himself like he remembers being someone else once. "You'll get used to it." Name's William. Used to be a clerk before the cough took my job. He demonstrates with a hacking wheeze that sounds like furniture breaking inside his chest. Been on the streets 3 years now. "How do you survive?" you ask, genuinely curious. William snorts. "Survive? This ain't living, friend. This is just not dying." He gestures around the room. "Look at us, London's finest collection of human refuse." He's not wrong. The faces around you tell 100 different stories of downfall. The old soldier with one arm who stares at nothing, still fighting a war in his head. The young woman with a hollow-cheeked baby hidden beneath her shawl. The once fine gentleman with perfectly polished shoes and a coat mended a dozen times. And the smell. It hits you in waves. Unwashed bodies, damp wool, the sickly sweet odour of disease, the sharp tang of urine from the overflowing bucket in the corner. No one has bathed in weeks. Some, not in years. A bath costs money that's better spent on food. You've got to understand the hierarchy, William continues. Penny sit-up is the bottom rung. Next is the 2-penny hangover, where you get a rope to lean on. Proper luxury, that is. He gestures to an imagined luxury. Then there's the 4-penny coffin, an actual wooden box to sleep in, practically a palace. And you? Where do you usually sleep? William's face darkens. Whatever I can afford. Some nights it's the streets, under a bridge if I'm lucky, a doorway if I'm not. Those nights the crushers, police will move you on every hour. Can't stop moving or they'll run you in for vagrancy. So you just walk all night, unless you want to end up in the workhouse. He spits the word like it's poison. I'd rather die in a ditch. The mere mention of the workhouse sends a ripple of tension through those nearby. It was Victorian England's solution to poverty, a prison for the crime of being poor. Last winter, William's voice drops. There was a woman outside Covent Garden. Crusher told her to move along. Had nowhere to go, see? Newborn baby with her. Temperature well below freezing. They found her in the morning, frozen solid on a doorstep. Baby too. The silence that follows feels thick enough to cut. Not because the story is shocking, everyone here has a similar tale, but because of the collective, unspoken acknowledgement that it could be any of us tomorrow. Your stomach cramps painfully, a reminder that you haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Food comes at 5, William says, noticing your discomfort. Bread and tea. Barely enough to keep a bird alive, but it's something. If you get it, a voice mutters from behind. You turn to see a boy who can't be more than 14, though his eyes belong to someone much older. They run out quick, they do. What happens in the morning, you ask, realizing you don't know the procedure. They kick us out at 6, William answers. Back onto the streets. Most will head to the docks or Covent Garden, try to pick up work. Strong backs can earn a few pennies, the rest of us... He trails off with a shrug. Beg, steal, whatever it takes. The long hours of the night. The hours crawl by. Your back screams for relief. Your eyelids feel like they're weighted with lead. Every few minutes, someone is prodded awake with a sharp jab of the monitor's stick. Occasionally, an argument breaks out over space or a stolen cap. The tensions of poverty boil over in small, vicious eruptions. This lot's civilized, William comments, after two men are separated before their shoving match can become something worse. You should see the place on Doggett Street. Knife comes out every night there. A hacking cough erupts from somewhere in the room, a deep, wet sound that speaks of consumption or tuberculosis. The deadly disease spreads like wildfire through places like this. You instinctively hold your breath, though you know it's futile. Girl died right where you're sitting last month, William says casually. Coughed blood all over, then just keeled over. They dragged her out the back. No family, so parish burial. Pauper's grave. He says this without emotion, just stating facts. Death is too common here to warrant special notice. At around 2 in the morning, the door bangs open, letting in a blast of frigid air. 2 men stumble in, supporting a third whose face is a mask of blood. Got jumped, one of the supporters explains to no one in particular. 3 thugs out Larkin, took his boots again. There's that collective lack of surprise. Violence is just another hazard of life on the streets. Could have been worse, William says quietly. Last summer, some rich boys set a sleeper on fire under the arches at Charing Cross. Thought it was a grand joke. Your stomach knots at the casual cruelty. In a warm bed at home, such stories would seem like fiction. Here they're just Tuesday. The injured man is settled on a bench. No medical attention is offered. He'll live, or he won't. Why do they hate us so much? You whisper, genuinely puzzled. William considers this. They don't see us as people. We're like rats to them. Vermin. A problem to be solved. He shifts on the hard bench. Read in the paper last week some doctor suggesting they should round us all up, ship us to Australia like they used to do with convicts, clean up the streets. But we haven't done anything wrong, you protest. The old man gives you a look that's half pity, half amusement. Being poor is the worst crime in England, friend. Always has been. The night inches forward. A clock somewhere strikes 3. The hall has settled into a restless, collective discomfort. You find yourself nodding off despite your best efforts. Your chin drops to your chest, and for a blessed moment sleep begins to take you, then a sharp pain in your ribs. William has elbowed you awake. Harris is coming, he whispers urgently. Look alive. You jerk upright just as the monitor passes. He gives you a suspicious look, but moves on. Thanks, you murmur. William nods. We look out for each other, or try to. It strikes you that despite the misery, there's a community here. The lowest rung of London society has its own rules. Help when you can, share what little you have, watch each other's backs. The man with the bloody face is now snoring softly. Someone has given him a cap to replace the one he lost. A woman 2 benches over is quietly sharing something wrapped in newspaper with the boy who spoke earlier. These small kindnesses seem almost miraculous in a place defined by deprivation. What was your bad luck, you ask? William's face closes off for a moment. Then he sighs. Wife died in childbirth, baby too. Started drinking, lost my position. Lodgings went next. Once you're on the street, it's near impossible to get back up. He rubs his chest unconsciously. Consumption will take me soon enough. I can feel it in my lungs. He says this matter-of-factly without self-pity. Just another reality of life at the bottom. Around 4 in the morning, a bell rings. Startling you. People begin to stir more actively. A current of anticipation runs through the hall. Breakfast, William explains, such as it is. 2 Salvation Army workers appear with large metal pots and begin moving down the rows. Each person receives a tin cup of thin tea and a small piece of bread. The tea is lukewarm and tastes faintly of metal, but it's wet and contains a hint of sugar. The bread is stale but edible. For many it will be their only food today. Eat slow, William advises. Fools gulp it down, then their stomachs cramp something fierce. You follow his advice, savouring each small bite of bread, each sip of weak tea. It's barely enough to take the edge off your hunger, but it's something. As people finish eating, the atmosphere in the hall changes subtly. Morning is coming. Soon they'll all be back on the streets, facing another day of scraping by. Some look defeated by the prospect, others have a determined set to their shoulders. "What will you do today?" you ask William. He coughs painfully before answering. "Try my luck at Covent Garden. Rich ladies sometimes give pennies to old soldiers." He taps his leg. "Got a bit of shrapnel in the knee from the Crimea. Not enough for a pension, but enough to earn a bit of sympathy when I play it up." You realise he's not actually old, probably no more than 50, but life on the streets has aged him prematurely. "And tonight?" you ask. He shrugs. "Depends what I earn. Maybe back here. Maybe the 2 penny, if I do well." He gives you a sidelong glance. "Word of advice? If you can scrape together 4 pence, get yourself a coffin for the night. Actually sleep lying down. Make all the difference in the world." Dawn and the streets of London. The bell rings again, longer this time. The monitors begin moving through the hall. "Time to go," William says, standing with a grimace of pain. London awaits. The doors of the shelter are thrown open, letting in the grey light of dawn and a blast of cold air that cuts through your inadequate clothing like a knife. Outside, the city is waking up. Carts rumble on cobblestones, a distant factory whistle blows. The smell of coal smoke hangs heavy in the air. People begin filing out, a procession of the destitute returning to the streets that are both their home and their prison. William pauses at the door. "Good luck to you," he says, offering his hand. You shake it, feeling the rough calluses of a life spent working. "Same to you," you reply. "Maybe I'll see you tonight." He smiles, revealing gaps where teeth should be. "Hope not. Hope you find better." Then he's gone, swallowed by the stream of humanity pouring out into the London morning. You follow, stepping onto the street. The cold hits you anew, seeping through the thin soles of your boots. Your stomach already cramps with returning hunger. The day stretches ahead, long and uncertain, but you're alive. You survived the night. For the homeless in Victorian London, that was sometimes victory enough. As you stand there, trying to decide which way to go, a passing gentleman in a fine wool coat averts his eyes from your obvious poverty. To him, you're invisible, or worse, a problem, a blemish on his prosperous city. He doesn't see the person you were before, or the person you might still become. He sees only what you are now, one of London's countless homeless, fighting for survival 1 penny at a time. Unlike you in your warm bed right now, the Victorian homeless had no respite, no comfort, no security. Their struggle didn't end with the dawn. It merely changed form, from the battle against sleep to the battle against hunger, cold, disease, and the crushing indifference of a society that saw poverty as a moral failing rather than a social ill. You take a deep breath of the sooty London air and step forward into the day, already thinking about how to earn enough for tonight's shelter. Perhaps the 2 penny hangover, where at least you can lean on a rope. Or, if fortune smiles, the 4 penny coffin with the luxury of lying flat. 1 step at a time, 1 penny at a time, 1 night at a time. That's how survival works when you're sleeping rough in Victorian London. You stumble away from the penny sit-up with William's advice ringing in your ears. The streets of London are already teeming with life despite the early hour. Carts rumble by, laden with goods. Street vendors call out their wares, and factory workers trudge to their 14-hour shifts. And everywhere, the invisible army of the homeless weaves through it all. Your stomach cramps fiercely. The tea and stale bread from breakfast are long gone, burned up by your body's desperate need for fuel. You need to earn some coins today, or you'll be sleeping under a bridge tonight. "Oi, you," A burly man loading crates outside a warehouse beckons you over. Need a pair of hands for the morning? 6 pence for 4 hours? 6 pence. That's enough for food and a better shelter tonight. You nod eagerly, and soon you're hefting wooden crates that smell of tea and spices. Each one weighs more than seems possible, and by the second hour your arms are trembling, but you keep going. 6 pence means a 2-penny hangover tonight instead of the sit-up. It means actually being able to lean on something and, maybe just maybe, get some real sleep. The work finishes just past noon. The foreman flips you a 6pence, which you catch and tuck quickly into a secret pocket you've sewn into your waistband. In Victorian London, showing money is an invitation to theft. You find a street vendor selling pea soup from a cart. "Penny a bowl," the woman says, eyeing your ragged clothes suspiciously. The soup is watery and lukewarm, but it fills the gnawing hole in your belly. You savour each spoonful, knowing it might be your only proper meal today. As you eat, you notice a young boy watching you hungrily from across the street. His face is so thin you can see the outline of his skull, and his eyes have that hollow look of chronic starvation. You hesitate, then beckon him over. "Here," you say, pushing the half-full bowl toward him. "Finish it." He doesn't speak, just snatches the bowl and gulps down the remaining soup. When he's done, he wipes his mouth with a grimy sleeve and gives you a nod before disappearing into the crowd. That small act of kindness leaves you oddly warmed, despite the biting cold. You've been on the streets long enough to know that such moments of connection are rare treasures. The afternoon stretches before you. With food in your belly and money for tonight's shelter, you allow yourself to simply walk, observing the city around you. London is a place of stark contrasts. Fine carriages roll past children in rags. Shop windows display luxuries while beggars huddle in doorways. As dusk approaches, you make your way toward the area known for its 2-penny hangovers. The streets grow narrower here, the buildings leaning toward each other as if sharing secrets. The smells intensify: rotting vegetables, human waste, the sour reek of poverty. You find the place, a nondescript building with a small sign reading Night Refuge 2D. Already a queue has formed, men and women with that particular look of the long-term homeless. Gaunt faces, weary eyes, clothes worn to shapeless rags. You join the line, clutching your precious 6pence. The sun has set and a freezing fog rolls in from the Thames, turning gas lamps into ghostly orbs. Your breath forms clouds in the frigid air. First time at the hangover? The man behind you has a thick Irish accent and one eye clouded with cataracts. You'll be missing your penny sit-up, I warrant. "Is it that bad?" you ask. He gives a wheezing laugh. "Bad? It's a bloody marvel of human torture, so it is. But you can actually sleep, if you don't mind waking with a neck so stiff you'll think you died in the night." The line shuffles forward. You can hear raised voices from inside, an argument over money or space or some perceived slight. The homeless may band together for survival, but tension runs high when resources are scarce. "Name's Patrick," the Irishman says. "Was a bricklayer till I lost the eye. Now I'm what the fancy folks call indigent." He pronounces the word with mock refinement. "What happened to your eye?" you ask. "Ah, lime mortar. A splash of it went right in. Didn't have coin for a doctor, so..." He shrugs. London's full of one-eyed bricklayers. We're practically a guild. The queue moves again. You're at the entrance now, a narrow door guarded by a man built like a prizefighter. "Tuppence," he grunts, holding out a meaty hand. You drop the coins into his palm and he jerks his head toward the interior. Through there, find a space. No fighting, no stealing, no pissing on the floor. Break the rules, you're out on your arse with no refund. The room beyond is long and narrow, lit by a few smoky lanterns that do more to create shadows than dispel them. Along both walls run wooden benches, and stretched in front of each bench is a thick rope, held about 3 feet off the ground by metal posts. Draped over these ropes, like laundry hung out to dry, are people. They lean forward over the rope, arms dangling, heads lolling in a posture that looks profoundly uncomfortable, yet allows a kind of half-sleep. The rope supports their weight, keeping them from falling forward off the bench. "Jesus Christ," you mutter, taking in the scene. "Nah, he's got better accommodations," Patrick says behind you. "This here's for sinners like us." The room holds perhaps 60 people already, with space for 20 more. The smell hits you like a physical force. Unwashed bodies, damp wool, the sickly sweet odour of festering wounds, and the unmistakable tang of urine despite the rule against it. You find an empty spot on a bench and gingerly take your place. The wooden seat is hard and cold, worn smooth by countless bodies before yours. The rope in front of you is surprisingly rough, made of hemp that scratches your hands when you grip it. Trick is to get your weight just right, Patrick advises, taking the spot next to you. Too far forward, the rope cuts into you. Too far back, you'll fall off when you doze. You adjust your position, trying to find that precarious balance. Around you, others are doing the same or have already found it, and hang suspended in that strange half-sleep. A woman across from you catches your eye. She's older, with grey hair escaping from beneath a tattered bonnet. Despite her obvious poverty, there's a dignity to her posture, a refusal to be completely broken by circumstances. "First hangover?" she asks, noticing your awkward adjustments. You nod. "Put your wrists over first, then let your head drop," she demonstrates, her thin arms draped over the rope, hands dangling. "Spreads the pressure, otherwise you'll have a rope burn across your chest come morning." You follow her advice and find it does help. "Thank you." "Martha," she introduces herself, "former lady's maid to a duchess. Now, lady's maid to this fine establishment." Her dry humour is unexpected. "What happened?" you ask, then immediately regret the question. On the streets, personal histories are often guarded, but Martha doesn't seem offended. "Duchess died. New duchess brought her own maid. At my age, not many families looking to hire. Spent my savings, and here I am." She says this matter-of-factly, without self-pity. Before you can answer, a commotion erupts at the far end of the room. Two men are arguing, their voices rising sharply above the general murmur. "That's my spot. Been sitting there every night this month," one shouts. "Don't see your name on it," the other sneers. "Move along, Grandad." The first man, indeed elderly, stands his ground. "I'm not moving. You can find another spot." The second man, younger and stronger, smiles unpleasantly. What happens next is brutally quick. The younger man shoves the older one hard. The elderly man stumbles backward, loses his balance, and falls heavily. There's a sickening crack as his head hits the floor. For a moment the entire room goes silent. Then the elderly man groans, a hand going to his bloodied head. The guard who took your money appears, alerted by the noise. He takes in the scene with practiced indifference. "Both of you out," he says flatly. "But he pushed me," the elderly man protests weakly from the floor. "Don't care. No fighting. Rules are rules." The younger man smirks, but his triumph is short-lived. "You too," the guard says to him. "Out." "I paid my tuppence," the young man protests. The guard steps closer, using his considerable bulk as a threat. Want to make it harder than it needs to be? The young man glares, but backs down. He stalks toward the door, kicking over a small bundle that presumably belongs to the elderly man. Two other residents help the elderly man to his feet. Blood trickles from a cut on his scalp, but head wounds always bleed dramatically. He'll likely be fine physically at least, but he's lost his shelter for the night, and at his age, a night on the streets in winter could be a death sentence. As they help him to the door, the elderly man looks around the room, his eyes finding yours for a brief moment. The naked despair in them strikes you like a physical blow. This is what it means to be homeless in Victorian London. Complete vulnerability, with no recourse, no protection, no justice. The incident cast a pall over the room. People avoid eye contact, hunching more deeply over their ropes as if trying to disappear. Violence is a constant companion to poverty, but no one ever gets used to it. "Happens every night," Martha says quietly. "Different people, same story. When you've got nothing left but your dignity, some folks get mighty protective of it." Your position on the rope is growing increasingly uncomfortable. The hemp digs into your wrists and chest. Your back aches from the unnatural posture. And yet, incredibly, people around you are managing to sleep this way. Their breathing deepens, occasionally punctuated by snores or muttered words from dreams. "Does it get easier?" You ask Martha, shifting to relieve the pressure on your chest. The rope? No. She gives a small, sad smile, but the desperation to sleep eventually wins out over the discomfort. As if to demonstrate, her eyelids droop, and within moments she's drifted off, her body somehow finding equilibrium draped over the rope. It looks about as comfortable as sleeping on a clothesline, but exhaustion is a powerful force. You try to follow suit, letting your head drop forward, trying to relax despite the awkward position. Each time you start to drift off, your body jerks awake, a primal response to the sensation of falling. Beside you, Patrick has no such troubles. He leans on the rope with the practiced ease of long experience, already asleep, his breathing raspy but regular. The hours crawl by, the lanterns burn lower, casting the room in deepening shadow. Outside, you can hear the occasional clip-clop of hooves or shout from a late-night reveller, but London's daytime roar has subsided to a murmur. Your discomfort intensifies as the night wears on. Your neck develops a crick that sends shooting pain down your spine. Your wrists, bearing much of your weight against the rope, grow raw and chafed. Your legs cramp from the awkward seated position. But around 3 o'clock in the morning, something strange happens. Your exhaustion finally overwhelms your discomfort, and you slip into a state that's not quite sleep but is no longer fully awake. It's a twilight consciousness where time loses meaning. Images flicker behind your eyelids, memories, dreams, hallucinations born of exhaustion. You see William from the penny sit-up, but in your dream state he's young again, walking through Regent's Park with his wife. You see the hungry boy who took your soup, but he's clean and well-fed, running through sunlit streets. You see yourself as you once were, before whatever circumstances brought you here. This is what it's like to be an indigent, as Patrick put it, to be haunted by the ghost of the life you once had, while your body struggles to survive the present. The hall has grown colder as the night deepens. London winters are damp, the cold seeping into your bones in a way that seems impossible to escape. Your thin clothes do little to keep it at bay. The air in the hall has grown thicker, harder to breathe, hundreds of bodies in an enclosed space with poor ventilation. The few windows are sealed against the cold, trapping the miasma of human misery inside. Unlike your warm bed at home with clean sheets and fluffy pillows, there's no escape from the physical reality of poverty here. It's in every painful breath, every aching muscle, every rumble of your empty stomach. It's in the constant proximity of others. No privacy, no personal space, just the collective struggle to survive one more night. The clock strikes 4, 2 more hours until release. Your body feels like it's been beaten, every joint stiff, every muscle screaming. But there's a strange solidarity in the shared discomfort. No one here is suffering alone. This is the community of the desperate, the fellowship of the forgotten. As dawn breaks, you are finally released from the suffocating enclosure of the night refuge. The 2-penny hangover, a marvel of human torture as Patrick called it, has done its job. You are alive. You have not frozen to death, but you are far from rested. Your neck is so stiff it feels like a solid rod, and your wrists are raw from the rope. Patrick and Martha emerge with you into the chilly London morning. "I'm off to the docks," Patrick says, his raspy voice seeming out of place in the grey dawn. "The ships are in from India. Always work unloading at the docks." Martha, with her quiet dignity, nods. "I'll try the markets. Maybe a lady needs a porter for her parcels." You have your 6pence, and for the first time in a long time, you have a choice. You could go back to the penny sit-up and save the 4pence, or you could spend it and get a taste of real rest. The thought of lying down flat in a wooden coffin for the night, of being able to stretch out your aching muscles, is an intoxicating one. You say goodbye to Patrick and Martha, wishing them luck, and head toward the area William mentioned, where the 4-penny coffin houses are located. The promise of a brief escape from the brutal reality of the streets, if only for a night, is a powerful motivator. As you walk, the city fully awakens around you. Carriages with well-dressed occupants splash mud on your thin boots. The smell of frying bacon wafts from a cafe, a scent so rich it makes your stomach clench. You clutch your 6pence, your one small link to this world of comfort and plenty. The day is ahead of you, long and hard, a constant battle against hunger and cold. But tonight, there is a glimmer of hope. a small wooden box, a final temporary luxury, awaits. It's not a home, not a bed, not a life you once knew, but in Victorian London, it's a palace. What choice would you have made? Would you have saved your money or spent it all for a night of proper rest? Hello, and welcome to another gentle descent into the past. Tonight, we'll open the doors to a world once lost, now rediscovered through quiet storytelling. Perhaps you're lying still beneath the covers, the comforting weight of your blanket a stark contrast to the historical anxieties we'll explore. Or maybe you're letting the last hours of the day melt away, the fading light mirroring the slow extinguishing of hope we'll encounter. Either way, I'm honoured to have you here, sharing this contemplative space. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Are we continents apart, separated by vast oceans, or just a few time zones away, both listening as the stars begin their slow, eternal emergence across the darkened sky? If you find solace in resting to soft-spoken tales and thoughtful history, if the echoes of bygone eras captivate you, be sure to subscribe. There's so much more to uncover together, so many forgotten lives and chilling realities to bring to light. Picture this. The pre-dawn chill bites at your exposed skin as you stand in the colossal shadow of Hampton Court Palace, its ancient stones looming like a silent, indifferent giant, indifferent to the human drama unfolding within its walls. Your hands, usually steady and skilled from years of practice, are trembling uncontrollably, the fine tremor running up your arms as a royal messenger, his face grim and urgent, pounds on your humble door at dawn, the insistent thud echoing the frantic beat of your own heart, a drum of fear. The year is 1538, a time of brutal power and fragile life, when a king's whim could decide a man's fate, and you've just been summoned, not merely invited, but commanded by royal decree to serve as personal physician to the most dangerous, unpredictable, and ultimately doomed man in England, Henry VIII. Your heart races, a frantic drum against your ribs, because you know, with chilling certainty, the grim statistics of the king's previous doctors. The whispers have reached your ears, carried on the courtly winds, tales told in hushed tones behind closed doors. Some have fled in terror, abandoning their lucrative careers and fleeing across the channel to safer lands, seeking anonymity over certain death, choosing exile over execution. Others, less fortunate, have been publicly executed for their perceived failures, their heads gracing London Bridge as a stark, gruesome warning to any who might dare to displease the monarch. And the rest, perhaps the most unsettling fate of all, have simply disappeared, swallowed by the unforgiving maw of the Tudor court, their names erased from memory as if they never existed, their very lives expunged from the record. You clutch your worn leather satchel, the cool, smooth leather, a deceptive comfort against your sweaty palm. Its contents a grim testament to medieval medicine, a collection of dubious cures and painful instruments. Inside are primitive surgical tools, crude lancets designed for copious bloodletting, their edges still sharp but rarely clean, rusted bone saws whose very sight promises agony, implements fit for a butcher rather than a healer. Alongside them bottles of volatile, gleaming mercury, believed by the learned men of your time to purge disease, but in truth a slow, insidious poison that would eventually render minds mad and bodies broken, and jars of writhing leeches, squirming sluggishly in damp moss, their plump bodies a testament to the sanguinary practices of the age, eagerly awaiting their next meal of royal blood. You know full well, with a growing sense of despair that threatens to overwhelm you, that these medieval remedies are about as effective as praying to stop a charging bull, a beast of raw, unstoppable force that will trample all in its path. But here's the terrifying truth that clamps down on your chest, stealing your breath and tightening your throat, a truth cold as ice. You have no choice but to try, because refusing the king, to serve him, to deny his absolute will, to even hesitate, means certain, agonizing death, perhaps drawn and quartered for insolence, your entrails spilled for the rabble to gawk at. And failing him, failing to achieve the impossible, well, that might mean an even worse fate, a prolonged public spectacle of your professional downfall before the final brutal act, a chilling message sent to any who might follow. Welcome then to your new reality as Henry VIII's doctor, where every diagnosis could be your last, every treatment a gamble with your own life, and where the line between healer and victim becomes horrifyingly thin, blurring until it's indistinguishable, until you can no longer tell who is the torturer and who is the tortured. You're about to discover why being a royal physician in Tudor England wasn't just the most prestigious medical position in the realm, a pinnacle of scholarly achievement and social standing. It was quite possibly the most dangerous, soul-crushing job in all of Europe, a high-stakes performance played out on a stage where the slightest misstep, the faintest sign of doubt, the merest flicker of uncertainty could cost you everything: your reputation, your liberty, your family's future, and ultimately your very head. Your first challenge hits you like a physical blow, a nauseating wave of realization before you even meet the king. It's not the majesty of the palace that overwhelms you, but the pervasive sense of decay. As you're escorted through the labyrinthine palace corridors, the echoing footsteps of your armed guards the only sound, each step amplifying your internal dread, each turn leading you deeper into the heart of the royal nightmare, past tapestries so richly woven they are worth more than entire villages, depicting heroic battles and mythical beasts in vibrant threads, their beauty a jarring contrast to the ugliness within. You catch your first whiff of what awaits you. The stench is overwhelming, a physical assault on your senses, so potent it seems to cling to the very air, permeating your clothes and hair, a nauseating cocktail of rotting flesh, the sickly sweet smell of decay that makes your stomach clench, infected wounds, a sharper metallic tang, almost like stale blood, and bodily fluids that haven't been properly cleaned in weeks, mingling with the heavy, cloying, sweet scent of overwrought perfumes, frankincense and rosewater, attempting, futilely, to mask the omnipresent decay, only succeeding in creating a cloying, sickly sweetness that is almost worse. The courtiers you pass, their faces pale and drawn beneath their fashionable coifs and ruffs, hold perfumed handkerchiefs to their noses, their expressions a mix of grim resignation and carefully feigned indifference, their eyes avoiding yours. They avert their eyes, not wishing to acknowledge the source of the malady, or your grim task, the unpleasant reality of their king's suffering. But you don't have that luxury. You're walking directly toward the source of that smell, drawn by an invisible, putrid thread, like a moth to a grotesque flame, a moth drawn to its own destruction. The massive oak doors, carved with royal crests and intricate designs, depicting the Tudor rose and the king's personal emblems, swing open with a groan that seems to echo your own internal dread, hinges protesting against their great weight, revealing the chamber beyond. And there he is, Henry VIII, King of England, defender of the faith, the supreme head of the Church of England, master of all he surveys, and now your new patient. But this isn't the robust, athletic monarch from his younger portraits, the golden-haired, athletic jouster of courtly legend, radiating strength, virility, and indomitable will. This is a man transformed, ravaged by time and illness, by excess and indulgence, into a living nightmare of medical horrors, a monument to physical collapse and barely contained rage, a man on the precipice of madness. At 47 years old, an age often considered elderly in this unforgiving era where life was short and brutal, Henry weighs nearly 400 pounds. His body, a bloated monument to excess and decay, strains visibly against the elaborate silks and velvets of his attire, the seams pull taut, threatening to burst, unable to contain his massive bulk. His face is puffy and mottled with burst veins, a network of red and purple against his pallid, unhealthy skin, his once piercing eyes now small, bloodshot, and almost lost in the folds of flesh, peering out from swollen lids. His breathing is laboured and wheezing, each inhale a struggle, a rasping, gurgling sound that fills the heavy air of the chamber, punctuated by coughs. But it's his leg, the left one, that makes your stomach lurch, threatening to bring up the meagre breakfast you forced down earlier, a wave of nausea washing over you. The king's left leg is a grotesque spectacle of medieval medicine gone wrong, a testament to years of neglect and misguided treatments. What started as a jousting injury years ago, a seemingly minor wound, has become an ulcerous, weeping abyss that refuses to heal, despite every crude intervention applied by your unfortunate predecessors, each attempt only deepening the infection. The flesh around it is blackened and putrid, a landscape of necrosis, a testament to the unchecked infection, constantly oozing a thick, viscous mixture of pus and blood that stains his elaborate, once pristine stockings a sickening brown, soaking through layer after layer of fine linen and silk. The smell is so overpowering, so utterly pervasive, that even the king's closest advisors struggle not to gag in his presence, turning their heads subtly away, attempting to shield their senses, their faces pale with discomfort. And now, this festering catastrophe, this living testament to medical failure and royal decay, this putrid limb, is your sole, terrifying responsibility, Doctor. Doctor, the king growls, his voice a dangerous rumble that seems to shake the very floorboards beneath your feet, vibrating. With absolute authority and barely contained menace. My previous physician assured me this wound would heal within a fortnight. That was 6 months ago. He now decorates a spike outside the Tower of London. I trust you'll be more successful. His eyes, narrowed with suspicion and pain, bore into yours, devoid of warmth, filled with an expectation that borders on outright menace, a silent, chilling promise of the gallows if you fail, if you do not perform the impossible. Your mouth goes dry, the saliva suddenly absent, your tongue feeling like sandpaper, as you realize the full, horrifying scope of your predicament. You're looking at a leg wound that, by all medical understanding of your time, an understanding you are increasingly realizing to be woefully, tragically inadequate, a mere collection of baseless theories, should have killed the king months ago. The infection is clearly spreading, not just locally, eating away at his flesh, but systemically, turning his very blood poisonous, and his already volatile temper even more unpredictable, if such a thing were possible, each day drawing him closer to true madness. With your primitive understanding of anatomy, based on centuries-old texts and flawed animal dissections, and your complete ignorance of germ theory, a concept light years beyond your comprehension, you're essentially being asked to perform a miracle with tools that belong in a torture chamber, implements designed for crude cuts, for inflicting pain, not subtle healing, not alleviating suffering. But here's what makes your situation truly hellish, a waking nightmare that twists your gut with cold dread and leaves you breathless, a constant gnawing anxiety. You can't simply tell the king that his wound is beyond help, that the infection is too far gone, that modern medicine, let alone medieval, has no cure for such an advanced state of decay. Henry has already proven time and again his ruthless, unforgiving nature towards those who deliver unwelcome news or fail to meet his impossible, often irrational demands. Physicians before you, men of considerable reputation, learned scholars and practitioners, have vanished from court or faced public humiliation and brutal death for such perceived slights. Dr. William Butts, one of Henry's earlier doctors, a man known for his cautious wisdom and gentle demeanour, a voice of reason in a tumultuous court, once made the grave mistake of suggesting, ever so gently, that the king's excessive lifestyle, his gluttony, his lack of exercise, his constant feasting, might be contributing to his persistent health problems. He barely escaped with his life, stripped of his honours and banished from court in utter disgrace, his career ruined, and only because Henry was, by some unfathomable miracle, in an unusually merciful mood that day, a fleeting moment of grace in a reign of terror. Your own training, the very foundation of your entire career, was a rigid adherence to dogma rather than empirical observation. It consisted of poring over dusty ancient texts, the works of venerable Greek and Roman physicians like Galen and Hippocrates, men who had been dead for over 1,000 years, their knowledge calcified into unquestionable truth, their words sacred texts and whose understanding of the human body, you are increasingly realizing with a chilling clarity, was fundamentally flawed, based on guesswork and animal dissection rather than true human anatomy. You believe, with all the certainty instilled by your education, that illness is caused by an imbalance of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The solution, therefore, as you've been meticulously taught in your endless hours of study, is to drain the excess, or to restore the precarious balance through various interventions. Your treatment options are thus tragically limited to barbaric practices: indiscriminate bloodletting, opening veins to drain pints of life-giving fluid, weakening the patient, aggressive purging that racks the body with violent vomiting and diarrhea, dehydrating and exhausting them, administering toxic mercury compounds in the desperate, misguided hope of curing unseen maladies like syphilis, a slow poison, and applying squirming leeches to draw out bad blood, clinging like grotesque jewels, their suckers a grim sight. As you examine the king's putrid leg wound, forcing yourself to suppress the gorge rising in your throat from the overwhelming, pervasive stench, the horrifying truth dawns on you with chilling clarity. Everything you've learned about medicine is not just useless in this context, it's actively harmful. The bloodletting that you've been rigorously trained to perform will only further weaken Henry's already compromised immune system, making him more susceptible to the very infections you are supposedly fighting, draining his vitality, making him more vulnerable. The mercury treatments you're expected to administer, a heavy silvery liquid, are slowly poisoning him, degrading his cognitive functions, causing tremors and rotting his internal organs, turning him into a living corpse, a shell of his former self. The leeches you apply, wriggling blindly on his festering flesh, are not drawing out bad humours, but are, in fact, introducing even more bacteria into his already grievously infected wounds, deepening the corruption, adding to the problem. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of your new position isn't the primitive, barbaric medicine, nor even the constant gnawing threat of execution that hangs over you like a Damocles sword, ever poised to fall. It's the dawning, horrifying realization that Henry VIII isn't just physically ill, a victim of his own excesses and the limits of medical knowledge. He's mentally unhinged, spiraling into a terrifying madness that consumes all around him. The same head injury from that fateful jousting accident in 1536, the very impact that damaged his leg, also seems to have fundamentally altered his personality, tearing away the veneer of the once learned and charismatic monarch, revealing a monstrous interior. The king who once penned intricate theological treatises and composed beautiful music, a man renowned for his intellect and courtly graces, has become a paranoid, violent tyrant whose mood swings are as unpredictable as they are deadly, shifting from boisterous laughter to murderous fury in the blink of an eye, leaving everyone around him in a state of perpetual anxiety and fear. You watch in growing horror as Henry's eyes, once described as intelligent and piercing, now dart around the room with barely contained rage, constantly searching for perceived slights, for disloyalty, for imagined conspirators lurking in the shadows, seeing enemies everywhere. His hands, swollen and heavy with the weight of numerous rings, clench and unclench spasmodically as he speaks, betraying a barely suppressed violence, a constant threat of explosion. And you notice the way courtiers, hardened veterans of courtly intrigue and political manoeuvring, instinctively step back just a hair's breadth. When he moves, a silent, almost imperceptible acknowledgement of his unpredictable and lethal power, a dance of fear. This is a man who has already executed 2 wives, countless nobles, and numerous servants for perceived slights, for offences that range from outright treason to merely incurring his fleeting displeasure, his whims as deadly as a plague. And now your life, your very existence hangs by a thread, dependent on somehow healing a body that is quite literally rotting from the inside out, a task you know with chilling certainty to be utterly miserably impossible, a death sentence for both king and physician. The king's daily routine swiftly becomes your nightmare, a relentless cycle of dread, futile action, and desperate charade that grinds you down. Each morning, as the first grey light filters through the palace windows, painting the world in shades of despair, you must enter his chamber, the stench a little fouler than the day before, a little more pervasive, and inspect his wounds. You pretend that your primitive treatments are actually helping, nodding sagely, making elaborate pronouncements about the balance of humours, offering empty reassurances that ring hollow even to your own ears, while secretly knowing that you're probably making everything worse, exacerbating his agony and prolonging his suffering. You watch, numb with horror, as servants, their faces carefully impassive, their eyes avoiding yours, change his bandages, the thick cloth coming away soaked in putrid blood and pus, revealing the raw, weeping flesh beneath, the air around you thick with the miasma of decay, a suffocating presence, and you're expected to nod sagely and adjust his treatment accordingly, as if these futile gestures held any true efficacy, any hope of healing, any genuine purpose. Your medical bag, a symbol of your supposed expertise and a cruel irony, contains implements that would make a modern doctor weep with despair and revulsion, crude knives for bloodletting that are rarely, if ever, truly cleaned, still bearing the faint, unsettling stains of previous royal blood, remnants of past failures, bottles of mercury that you now know, from bitter experience and grim observation, are pure poison. Their silvery gleam a sinister promise of slow torment, a glittering death, and various herbs and tinctures whose effects are based more on ancient superstition and wishful thinking than any verifiable science, their efficacy purely imagined, their danger very real. Every morning you mix these medieval cocktails of death, carefully measuring out quantities of lead, arsenic, and other toxic compounds, your hands steady despite your internal turmoil, knowing that each dose might be the one that finally tips the king over the edge, or perhaps simply prolongs his suffering, extending his agony and your own precarious existence. But it gets worse, the layers of your torment accumulating like sediment, weighing you down further. Henry doesn't just expect you to treat his physical ailments, the festering ulcer and the crushing headaches. He demands that you cure his marital problems as well, intruding upon the most private aspects of his life with chilling casualness. The king is desperately trying, with an almost frantic obsession, to produce a male heir with his current wife, the fragile Queen Jane Seymour. His desire for a legitimate son to secure the Tudor dynasty is paramount, overshadowing all other concerns, a national obsession that bleeds into his private life. And when she fails to conceive quickly enough, when the months pass without the joyous announcement of a pregnancy, when the hope fades to despair, replaced by a brooding silence, Henry, in his increasingly irrational mind, assumes it must be a medical issue, a defect in her or in his own constitution, rather than a matter of divine will or natural chance. You're expected to examine the Queen, perform intrusive examinations that fill her with quiet dread and humiliation, prescribe potent fertility treatments that often leave her weak and ill, and somehow, miraculously, guarantee that she'll bear a healthy son, a task as impossible as it is dangerous, a burden too heavy to bear. The pressure is unimaginable, a suffocating weight that presses down on your very soul, threatening to crush you, because if Jane fails to produce an heir, if she delivers another daughter, or, God forbid, miscarries, Henry will almost certainly blame you for the medical failure, for your supposed incompetence, for your inability to bend nature to his will, before he turns his full, terrifying wrath on his innocent wife, who will likely follow her predecessors to the scaffold. Your days are filled with a constant, gnawing terror that never lets up, a cold knot in your stomach that tightens with every unexpected sound, every hurried message, every shadow that lengthens. Every knock on your door could be the heavy tread of guards coming to arrest you, to drag you to the tower's grim embrace, to face summary justice. Every summons to the king's chambers, even for a minor complaint, might be your last, a prelude to your doom, the final curtain call on your life. You've seen what happens to those who displease Henry, the public spectacles of his retribution, etched into the collective memory of the court. The executions are public, brutal, and designed to send a chilling message to anyone who might dare to. Cross the king to defy his will. The king particularly enjoys watching his enemies suffer, prolonging their agony for maximum impact, a perverse pleasure that chills you to the bone. and as his doctor, you're in the unique position of being both essential to his survival, the last desperate hope of a dying monarch, a valued commodity, and yet completely expendable if you fail to deliver results, a tool to be discarded when its purpose is served, a broken instrument to be tossed aside. The morning mist still clings to the ancient castle walls, a ghostly shroud that seems to muffle sound and light, as you, Henry's personal physician, make your way through the dimly lit, perpetually damp corridors toward the king's chambers. The air is heavy with the scent of old stone, damp rushes covering the floor and underlying decay, a pervasive odour that seeps into everything. Your leather satchel bounces against your hip, a constant, heavy reminder of your terrible burden. Heavy with the crude tools of your trade, each jostle a reminder of your predicament. But calling them tools is perhaps too generous a term for these implements of archaic torture, relics of a superstitious age. What you carry are the instruments of medieval medicine, honed by centuries of misguided tradition and unchallenged dogma, passed down through generations of unquestioning belief, each one more terrifying than the last, and none of them truly capable of helping your royal patient, only of inflicting more pain and speeding his inevitable decline, hastening his journey to the grave. Your fingers trace the cold, unforgiving metal of your phlebotom, a sharp, gleaming blade designed for bloodletting, its edge deceptively inviting, promising relief that never comes, only weakness. This will be your most frequently used instrument in treating the king, a barbaric ritual performed with sickening regularity, draining his very life force, weakening his already struggling body. According to the rigid, unyielding medical wisdom of your time, a wisdom passed down through generations of unquestioning scholars, monks and masters, Henry's festering leg wound, his mounting rage, his chronic headaches, and his general ill health all stem from a fundamental imbalance of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The solution, therefore, as you've been meticulously taught in your dusty treatises, is to drain the excess, or to restore the precarious balance through various interventions. Never mind that each bloodletting session, each pint of vital fluid drawn from his already weak body, leaves the already weakened king paler, more irritable, and even more susceptible to the myriad infections that plague him, hastening his descent into the abyss. You pause outside the royal chambers, taking a deep, shuddering breath, desperately steeling yourself for what lies ahead, for the confrontation with decay and fury, the inevitable confrontation with a dying monarch whose very glance can condemn. Through the heavy oak door, intricately carved with mythical beasts and royal symbols, you can already hear Henry's laboured breathing, a rasping, wheezing, gurgling sound that fills the heavy silence of the corridor, and the occasional grunt of pain, a constant reminder of his suffering. At over 300 pounds, the king's massive, bloated frame puts tremendous strain on his heart, already struggling to pump blood through his diseased body, his once powerful physique now a ruin, a testament to his own excesses, and the infected ulcer on his leg has been weeping pus for months, a relentless, putrid fountain of decay that seems to defy all attempts at cleanliness. The stench that greets you when you enter is overwhelming, a cloying, suffocating mixture of rotting flesh, unwashed body, and the heavy, cloying, sweet scent of the herb-scented oils that previous physicians have slathered on the wound to no avail, a desperate attempt to mask the inevitable, to disguise the overwhelming putrefaction. Henry glares at you from his bed, his small eyes nearly lost in the folds of his bloated face, a mask of pain and fury, his gaze sharp and accusatory. "Well?" he demands, his voice a dangerous rumble that seems to shake the very floorboards beneath your feet, vibrating with absolute authority and barely contained menace. "What miracle cure do you bring me today, Doctor?" The sarcasm in his voice is unmistakable, honed by years of failed treatments and broken promises from physicians before you, a testament to his bitter experience, his crushing disappointment in a profession that promises much and delivers little. You've seen what happened to some of your predecessors, men who walked this very path, who faced this very gaze, who now reside in unmarked graves or have become nameless examples. Dr. Butts, who dared to suggest that Henry's diet might be contributing to his problems, was banished from court, his reputation in tatters, his career ended. Dr. Wendy, who failed to cure a particularly severe bout of headaches, simply disappeared one night, swallowed by the silence of the court, and no one at court speaks of him anymore, as if uttering his name would invite the same fate, a chilling warning. You set down your satchel with a soft thud, the sound echoing in the chamber, and begin arranging your instruments on a small table beside the king's massive four-poster bed, its velvet hangings heavy with dust and the pervasive scent of illness. First, the cupping vessels, small glass or metal bowls that you'll heat with a flame from a nearby candle, and then place on Henry's skin, creating a vacuum to draw blood to the surface. The theory, as preached by your ancient mentors, is that this will help rebalance his humours, drawing out the bad blood, but in reality, it will only add painful welts and fresh avenues for infection to his already suffering body, tiny wounds inviting new unseen enemies. Next, you lay out your collection of herbs and tinctures, each vial a symbol of misguided hope and potent danger. A bottle of mercury for what you believe are signs of the French pox, a terrifying venereal disease that ravages the body and mind, though you'd never dare voice this diagnosis aloud to the king, knowing the explosive reaction it would provoke, likely leading to accusations of blasphemy or worse. Opium mixed with wine to dull his incessant pain, a fleeting solace, a brief escape from agony, though it also clouds his already unstable mind, plunging him into periods of confused delirium and irrationality, and various plant extracts concocted from ancient recipes passed down through generations that are more likely to poison than heal. Their efficacy purely imagined, their danger very real, their ingredients often deadly. Your surgical tools gleam menacingly in the flickering candlelight, throwing long, dancing shadows across the chamber, transforming the space into a macabre operating theatre, a scene from a horrific play. A bone saw, its serrated edge a grim promise, should you need to amputate any part of his rotting leg, a procedure that would surely kill him, a last desperate act of butchery. Cauterizing irons, their tips black and charred from previous uses, stand ready to burn away infected flesh, a procedure so agonizing that even the king, for all his monstrous endurance and capacity for pain, has begged you to stop mid-treatment, his screams echoing through the palace, a chilling testament to the agony, a sound that will forever haunt your nightmares. Crude forceps, their jaws designed for brute force, for extracting pieces of dead tissue, tearing rather than gently removing, and a collection of knives sharp enough to cut, but utterly lacking any understanding of anatomy or infection control, each stroke a gamble with life and death, an act of blind hope and despair. The most disturbing tool in your arsenal isn't made of metal at all, and its presence sends a chill down your spine every time you behold it, a living embodiment of the era's medical barbarity. In a small wooden box, lined with damp moss, you keep a collection of live leeches, their black segmented bodies writhing sluggishly in the confinement, sensing the warmth of nearby flesh, their hunger palpable. These repulsive creatures will latch onto Henry's skin with their tiny, triple-pronged teeth, gorging themselves on his blood while you watch, helpless, and pray that this primitive form of bloodletting will somehow restore his health. A desperate, futile prayer. The sight of dozens of leeches covering the king's swollen, discoloured leg, bloated with his blood, is something that haunts your dreams, festering in your memory, a grotesque, squirming nightmare. But it's considered the height of medical sophistication in 1538, a testament to the era's profound and deadly ignorance. Perhaps most tragic of all, more heartbreaking than any physical torment, more soul-crushing than any fear of execution, is your complete, soul-crushing ignorance of what's actually wrong with your patient. You don't understand that Henry's leg wound is infected with bacteria, countless microscopic organisms, unseen armies of decay, far too small for you to see, or even to imagine their existence, their relentless, invisible assault on his body. You have no concept of germs, no knowledge of antiseptic practices, no understanding of how infection spreads from one body to another, or from your uncleaned instruments to the king's flesh. acting as a silent harbinger of death. When you move from examining his festering, oozing wound, forcing yourself to suppress your revulsion, the bile rising in your throat, to checking his pulse, pressing your fingers to his clammy wrist, you don't think to wash your hands, the unseen pathogens clinging to your skin, ready to transfer. When you reuse the same instruments, wiped cursorily on your already soiled robes, their fabric thick with grime and unseen contaminants, carrying untold armies of bacteria on different parts of his body, you're actually spreading the very infection you're desperately trying to cure, unknowingly sealing his fate, each action a step closer to the grave, a grave you are actively digging. Your diagnostic methods are based on superficial observation and rigid adherence to ancient Greek theories that have no basis in empirical reality, only in tradition and unquestioning belief. Their authority derived from age, not truth. You examine Henry's urine for colour and clarity, for sediment or cloudiness, believing this will tell you about the precise state of his humours, a medieval art of uroscopy practised with solemn gravity, its findings as baseless as they are elaborate. You check the alignment of the stars and planets, consulting elaborate astrological charts, convinced that celestial movements subtly influence earthly health and disease, a cosmic influence on mortal ailments. You consult complex charts that match zodiac signs to specific body parts, determining the best times for treatment based on astrological calculations rather than any medical need, a bizarre blend of astronomy and healing, a desperate attempt to impose order on chaos. The king's psychological state adds another layer of terrifying complexity to your already impossible task, twisting your duties into a perverse dance of madness. Years of brutal head injuries from jousting accidents, suffered in his more athletic youth, when he was a vision of strength, have left Henry with what modern doctors would recognise as severe traumatic brain injury from his jousting accident in 1536, just 2 short years before your current predicament. You witness his paranoid rages, his sudden shifts from jovial, boisterous laughter to murderous fury, his increasing inability to form coherent thoughts or maintain logical conversations, his mind fracturing, slipping further into a dark abyss. But your medieval understanding of the mind is even more primitive than your knowledge of the body. You believe that mental states are controlled by the same humoral imbalances that cause physical ailments. Henry's consuming rage, you theorize, must come from an excess of choler, or yellow bile, making him hot and angry, easily inflamed. His periods of melancholy, his brooding silences, must be due to too much black bile, leading to despair and dark thoughts. The solution, in your misguided mind, is more bloodletting, more purging, more of the same treatments that are slowly, inexorably killing him, pushing him further into the abyss of madness. A self-fulfilling prophecy of decay, a spiralling descent. Sleep offers no respite from your daily horrors, no escape from the relentless anxieties that plague you, not even in the deepest hours of the night. Your dreams, when they come, are filled with the king's distorted face, the stench of his wound, and the glint of the executioner's axe. You are summoned at all hours to attend to Henry's various complaints, often roused from a shallow, troubled sleep by urgent knocks on your chamber door. The sound a harbinger of fresh dread, of new demands. Sometimes it's his suppurating leg wound, which refuses to heal despite your daily applications of honey, pig fat, and ground herbs, a crude poultice applied with a desperate prayer, its effects negligible. Other times it's his chronic headaches, blinding migraines that you treat by applying heated cups to his scalp, creating painful blisters that you believe will draw out the corrupt humours from his very brain, a futile attempt to bleed out his agony, adding insult to injury. On the worst nights, when the moon hangs like a skull in the sky, a pale, ominous orb watching over your torment, you're called to witness Henry's terrifying fits of rage, where he threatens to have you hanged, drawn, and quartered for your failures as a physician, his eyes bulging with fury, spittle flying from his lips, his voice a roaring torrent of threats, promising unimaginable pain. Your surgical procedures are primitive beyond imagination, a testament to the barbarity of the age, each cut an act of desperation, a blind stab in the dark. When Henry requires surgery for an abscess, a bulging pocket of pus, you have no understanding of sterile technique, no concept of cleanliness beyond wiping away visible grime. Your instruments, crude iron tools that haven't been properly cleaned since your last patient, slice through royal flesh, their edges dull from repeated use, their surfaces harbouring unseen contagions. They are cleaned with wine if you're feeling particularly cautious, a symbolic gesture of purification, a small comfort, but more often they're simply wiped on your already filthy robes, their fabric thick with grime and unseen contaminants, carrying untold armies of bacteria. You operate by candlelight, the flickering flames casting eerie dancing shadows across the chamber, transforming the space into a macabre operating theatre, a scene from a horrific play performed for a dying audience. You work in rooms thick with smoke from the roaring fireplace and the suffocating stench of unwashed bodies, a grotesque tableau of medieval medicine, a miasma of illness and decay, a place where hope itself struggles to breathe. Infection is not a complication you can prevent. It's an inevitability you simply hope the patient will survive. A prayer whispered into the disease-ridden air, a desperate plea to an indifferent God who seems to have abandoned this chamber and all within it. The pharmaceutical remedies at your disposal are equally horrifying, a dangerous concoction of superstition and toxicity, each dose a potential death sentence. Your medicine chest contains vials of mercury, a heavy, shimmering liquid which you believe can cure syphilis, the great pox, a terrifying venereal disease that ravages the body and mind, though you'd never dare voice this diagnosis aloud to the king, knowing the explosive reaction it would provoke, likely leading to accusations of blasphemy or worse. Antimony, a toxic metal for various ailments, watching with grim satisfaction as patients develop violent vomiting and diarrhea that you interpret as the body heroically purging itself of disease rather than succumbing to poison, the symptoms mistaken for a cure, the suffering seen as healing. Your pain remedies include opium when you can obtain it, a rare and precious commodity, a fleeting escape from agony, a brief moment of oblivion. But more often, you rely on copious amounts of alcohol or simply tell patients to pray for divine intervention, as if faith alone could stem the tide of physical agony, as if God listened to such pleas in this palace of despair. Henry's diet, which you are expected to regulate for his health, a testament to the era's culinary excesses, consists of massive quantities of roasted meats, piled high on platters, rich white bread, and copious amounts of strong ale consumed throughout the day, a constant indulgence. Vegetables are considered peasant food and potentially dangerous to a king's delicate constitution, an uncultured and common sustenance deemed unfit for royalty, almost an insult to his status. You watch Henry consume pounds of roasted beef, entire chickens, and elaborate sugar sculptures, masterpieces of confectionery art, while his body grows ever more diseased and bloated, a grotesque parody of health, his physical decay mirroring his internal madness, each bite a step closer to the grave. When he complains of digestive problems, you, bound by the medical wisdom of your time, prescribe more meat and wine, believing that rich foods will strengthen his constitution, unknowingly exacerbating his underlying conditions, digging his grave with every spoon, every false remedy. Your knowledge of contagion is non-existent, a gaping hole in your understanding, making you a vector for disease rather than a healer. You move directly from treating plague victims, their bodies covered in swollen, weeping buboes, their breath ragged, to examining the king without washing your hands or changing your clothes, carrying the unseen seeds of pestilence, oblivious to your role in spreading death. You believe that disease is caused by bad air, miasma, invisible corruptions in the atmosphere, or divine punishment, a scourge from God, not by invisible organisms that can be transmitted through contact. This profound ignorance makes you incredibly dangerous to Henry's health, even as you desperately try to cure him, your very touch a potential harbinger of doom, a grim reaper in the guise of a physician. The weight of your position crushes down upon you every moment of every day, a suffocating burden that never lightens, a constant pressure on your chest that leaves you gasping for breath. You know that Henry has already executed Thomas More, his former chancellor and close friend, a man of unwavering principles and profound intellect, a martyr for his faith. You've watched Bishop Fisher's head roll for opposing the king's divorce from Catherine of Aragon, a grim spectacle of religious defiance and royal brutality. Thomas Cromwell, once Henry's most trusted advisor, the architect of his power and the engine of his reforms, a man who rose from humble beginnings to wield immense influence, was beheaded just 2 years ago, betrayed by the very king he served. A chilling lesson in the fickle nature of royal favour. If these powerful men with their vast networks, their cunning minds and their decades of loyalty couldn't escape Henry's wrath, what chance do you have as a mere physician who cannot cure what truly ails him, who is simply a pawn in this deadly game? Your greatest fear is not just death, a simple cessation of being, an end to your suffering, but the agonizing manner of your death, a prolonged public spectacle designed for maximum terror. Henry delights in creative, brutal executions for those who disappoint him, punishments designed to instill terror and obedience in his subjects, to solidify his absolute power. You might be burned alive for heresy if you suggest that God doesn't want Henry to have a son, a blasphemous utterance in his eyes, punishable by fire. You could be hanged, drawn, and quartered for treason if you fail to cure his impotence or his chronic leg wound, your body dismembered for public display, a gruesome warning to all who witness it. Or you might simply disappear one night, swallowed by the impenetrable darkness of the Tower of London, your body thrown into the cold, indifferent waters of the Thames like so many others who have fallen from royal favour, never to be seen or heard from again, your fate a chilling mystery to those you leave behind. Every morning you wake, a gasp of dread, knowing that this could be your last day alive. Each dawn a chilling reminder of your precarious existence, of the sword hanging over your head. Every treatment you prescribe, every potion you mix, could be the one that finally pushes Henry over the edge into murderous rage, a fatal misstep in your deadly dance with the king. Every failure to ease his excruciating pain brings you closer to joining the growing, grim list of those who have tried and failed to serve the most dangerous, unpredictable monarch in English history, another name added to the roll call of the dead. You are trapped in a nightmare of ignorance, brutality and terror, with no escape except death itself, a fate that looms larger with each passing hour, a shadow lengthening at your heels, following you wherever you go. The very air of the court is thick with unspoken fear, a palpable tension that you breathe in with every laboured breath. Courtiers whisper behind hands, their eyes darting nervously, assessing the king's mood, trying to gauge the danger. You, however, are forced to be the constant barometer of his deteriorating health, and thus, often, the immediate target of his fury. You see the glint of ambition in the eyes of his new advisers, men like Thomas Wriothesley and Edward Seymour, who would gladly see you fall if it meant gaining a sliver more influence with the king. They offer polite inquiries about Henry's progress, but their smiles never reach their eyes. Each question is a probe, each suggestion a trap. To dismiss their advice could be seen as an insult, a challenge to their growing power. To embrace it might lead to a fatal error. You must walk a tightrope, balancing on the edge of a precipice, with a king on one side and ambitious courtiers on the other. Even the king's jests are laced with a chilling undertone. He might playfully tap your shoulder with his enormous ring-heavy hand, a gesture that feels more like a threat. He might laugh, a booming, unhealthy sound, about a physician in a foreign court who was flayed alive for misdiagnosing a royal cough. You're expected to laugh along, a forced, hollow sound, while your blood runs cold. These are not idle threats. They are reminders of what awaits you should you stray. The isolation of your role is absolute. You are closer to the king than almost anyone, yet you are utterly alone. You cannot confide in other physicians, for they are either rivals or equally terrified. To speak truthfully about Henry's condition, to admit your powerlessness, would be treasonous. You are sworn to secrecy, a silent witness to a slow, agonizing demise, bound by an oath that protects the king's reputation more than his health. The burden of this knowledge, this shared secret of royal decay, eats away at your soul, leaving you sleepless and racked with anxiety. You watch Henry consume massive meals, pounds of meat, gallons of ale, ignoring your subtle attempts to suggest moderation. When he suffers from agonizing gout attacks, his joints swollen and inflamed, you apply soothing poultices, but know the true cure lies in a diet he refuses to abandon. He craves sweetmeats and rich pastries, blaming his stomach ailments on cold humours rather than his gluttony. And you, his physician, must provide him with more, knowing you are slowly killing him with kindness. Your attempts at innovation, however small, are met with suspicion. You might have heard whispers from continental Europe of new ideas, of barber surgeons advocating for cleaner cuts, of alchemists dabbling in compounds that hint at true chemical remedies. But to introduce such radical notions to the English court, to challenge the established wisdom of Galen and Hippocrates, would be to risk accusation of heresy or witchcraft. The established medical guild, resistant to change, would denounce you. The king, steeped in tradition, would see it as a challenge to his authority. So you continue with the ancient ways, the ineffective remedies, the harmful practices, trapped by a system that prefers comforting lies to unsettling truths. The sheer physical demand of your duties is relentless. You are on call at all hours, expected to attend the king's every complaint, no matter how trivial or how late the hour. Your own sleep is fragmented, your meals often cold and rushed. Your body aches from standing long hours, bending over the king's putrid leg, mixing noxious compounds. The constant stench of decay seems to seep into your very skin, clinging to your clothes, even your dreams. You are slowly wasting away, a shadow of the man you once were, sacrificed at the altar of royal well-being. And you cannot complain, for who would listen? To show weakness is to invite further scrutiny, perhaps even to be deemed unfit for your duties, which would lead to an even swifter, more brutal end. Your family, if they are with you at court, live under the same unspoken threat, their lives tethered to your precarious existence. Your wife whispers pleas for you to find an excuse to leave, to feign illness yourself, to forge a retirement, anything to escape the gilded prison that surrounds you. But you know there is no escape. Henry's physicians do not retire. They serve until death, either his or theirs. Their lives are inextricably linked, a symbiotic relationship of dread. You sometimes imagine a life in a remote village, tending to simple ailments, diagnosing fevers and setting broken bones, far from the stench of royal decay and the shadow of the executioner's axe. You envision children playing in the sun, a quiet hearth, simple joys. But such dreams are fleeting, quickly extinguished by the cold, harsh reality of your position. You are a prisoner of your own prestige, a highly valued slave to a mad king, bound by an invisible chain of terrifying duty. As 1540 approaches, the horrors only deepen, the king's condition deteriorating at an alarming pace. His leg wound grows more putrid, the stench filling the royal chambers like a physical presence, overwhelming all other senses. The ulcer, now a gaping maw, consumes more flesh. The edges are mottled blue-black, a clear sign of gangrene, though you cannot speak that word aloud. You apply poultices of honey and ground pearls, costly and useless treatments that only serve to prolong his suffering and inflate the royal coffers of unscrupulous apothecaries who profit from his agony. The king's rages are now almost daily occurrences, his face contorting with pain and paranoia, his voice a constant roar. He demands increasingly bizarre remedies, convinced that his lack of an heir or his festering wound is due to some hidden poison or divine curse, a malevolent force at work against him. You are forced to perform further trepanning, drilling holes into his skull as he screams, believing it will release evil humours or demonic possession, all while knowing you are simply adding to his agony and the risk of further infection, drilling holes in his sanity. The very air you breathe is heavy with his suffering and the knowledge of your complicity. The ultimate horror for you, the royal physician, is the profound, soul-crushing realization that you are not just witnessing a king's slow demise, but actively contributing to it, each action a complicit hand in his suffering. Every bleed, every dose of mercury, every unsanitary surgical procedure pushes Henry closer to the grave, each intervention a nail in his coffin. You are a man of knowledge, trained in the ancient arts of healing, yet you are forced to perpetuate ignorance. You are a healer, yet you cause harm. You are a loyal servant, yet you are slowly murdering your master, aiding in his destruction. The tragic irony of your position is a crushing weight, a constant torment that leaves you hollow. Each morning, as you rise to face another day of impossible choices, another day of agonizing futility, you catch your reflection in a polished silver basin. You see a man haunted, exhausted, his eyes bloodshot and shadowed, and utterly alone, a prisoner of a medical system that demands ritual over reason, superstition over science, and a monarch who demands results at any cost, regardless of the means. The king's bell rings, a harsh, insistent clang that shatters the fragile silence of the morning, signalling your summons. You gather your instruments, each one a testament to medical futility, each one a potential instrument of your own undoing, and walk towards the royal chambers, each step bringing you closer to another day of torture disguised as medicine, another day closer to either your king's death or your own. The executioner's axe, somewhere in the depth of the tower, waits patiently, its blade ever sharp, ever ready, for the next physician who fails to cure the incurable king, a silent, gleaming promise of oblivion, a final, brutal end to the nightmare.